Hi guys, my name is Professor Patel and welcome to the Photography Parlour, your one-stop shop for all matters photographic education. Today I wanted to share with you my basic editing workflow and take you on a whistle-stop tour of Camera Raw and show you the basics of dodging and burning to get that perfect finish on your images. So here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing that we want to do is open up our image. So we click on File and Open. Now, for this tutorial, I'm going to be using a self-portrait that I made in Malaysia a few years ago, and I just could not resist these beautiful big glass bricks just cascading in all this coloured light. This window that you can see here is Camera Raw. Now, if you don't know what that is, or if you don't know what a RAW file is, essentially a RAW is the biggest file type that you can produce with a DSLR camera. It's essentially data that needs converting into a photograph. And we do that with a conversion program such as Camera Raw. It also offers a fantastic opportunity to manipulate the pixels and to make enhancements and adjustments before we convert it into a fixed photo. So here's my few favorite ones, and at this point we just want to make some subtle adjustments, okay? So let me just zoom in a little bit so that you can see what I'm up to. There. So the exposure on this photograph is pretty good already. I'm quite happy with it. I just want to make that a little bit brighter. There we go. It's always a good idea as well, as you're learning the sliders and what each of these adjustments do, and there are lots of different adjustments that you can play with. I'd recommend always grabbing the slider and just pulling it right up to the top and seeing what happens, and pulling it right down to the bottom and see what happens. This way you can make informed decisions as to the refined adjustments that you want to make to your image. So I'm just going to add a tiny touch of contrast to the photograph. There we are. Brilliant. Highlights, I want a bit more of a glow to the bricks in the background there, so I'm just going to pull that up a little bit. There we go. Quite subtle again. And then the only other thing that I'm going to do is slide on the clarity a tiny little bit. Clarity adds an extra layer of sharpness to the image, as well as this kind of what I can only describe as crunchiness. So if we pull that right up, you'll see what I mean. There. But that's far, far too obvious. So I'm going to just tickle that up a tiny little bit. There. We want to capture as much quality out of the image in camera as you possibly can using the exposure triangle and camera settings, so that any Photoshop work and post-production work that you do is more about subtle enhancements and adjustments. So there, I'm happy with that, so we're going to click on Open Image. Okay, so here we are back in Photoshop and we are ready to get going. So the technique that I want to show you now is called dodging and burning. Essentially, it's the process of creating shape and almost a sense of 3D-ness in an image by making the dark bits darker and the light bits lighter. Nice and simple. It's an old darkroom technique that pretty much does the same thing. So to do this, we're going to be using the dodge and burn tools, which can be found in the tools palette just over here with these symbols. By the way, if you right-click on a tool in the tools palette, you'll get all of the options as the alternative tools or related ones that are available to you. There's a couple of checkboxes that I'd like us to discuss up here. I'll go into these in far more detail in another tutorial. I'm just going to whip through them today. But I'd like you to set your settings to range, being midtones, exposure, keep it subtle with 3%. That's essentially the strength of the tool. And by default, protect tones is on. I'd like you to turn it off. Done. Perfect. Another thing that we're going to do is copy our layer. Now we do this to work non-destructively, which means that we can go in and make adjustments to this really easily if we make a mistake or if we go too far, or we can make it more subtle afterwards by changing the layer opacity. So to do that, click and drag your layer that you wish to copy into the new layer icon at the bottom of the layers palette and let go. And you can see we've got a copy. Perfect. So let's have a look. So if we move right into the image, you want to get into like 100%, 200% max in terms of zoom. And let's start off by burning. So if we find the shadow areas and quite simply just scan around them and just brush into them. It's a brush tool, so you want to make sure that that's nice and soft. And then you can adjust the size there or with the shortcuts on the keyboard. And we're just going to go over the shadow areas that we can see here. Now, it may look like I'm doing nothing, but when we turn the layer on and off and we compare it to the original, you'll be able to see exactly the changes that we have made. So there, let's jump over to the layers palette and click the eye icon to the left of the layer to make it visible or invisible. So let's turn that layer off and watch my face. There we go. So let's go in there and dodge now a little bit and make the highlighted areas brighter. So if we start off working around the cheeks and the bridge of the nose, nostrils, sort of any bit that protrudes, essentially, you want to dodge. There. Now let's really quickly jump over to the layers palette again and make this invisible, and we can compare the edit to the original. So that's before and after, before and after. Now what we can do is dive into the photograph all over and give this a full works treatment. It's well worth spending your time doing this to make sure that you get that really beautiful refinement to the image and that real shape and structure and form to it. Okay, so I'll check in with you in a little bit once I've done that. Great, so here we are. If we check this layer on and off, we can see that we've added more shape and 3D-ness to the image and supported the lighting and what we were trying to do there. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do to this image. So there we go, my basic workflow techniques. Over the coming weeks, I will be diving more in depth into the individual tools in Photoshop, but that should get you started on a few things. In the meantime, be happy, keep shooting, and I'll see you next time in the parlour.